for the Agile community. www.Agile.FM. Thanks for tuning in into another episode of Agile.FM, and today I'm here with Jeff Gothelf, who is the author of a best-selling book of Lean UX, but he has now recently just released another book. It's called Sense and Response: How Successful Organizations Listen to Customers and Create New Products Continuously. That book was written with Josh Seiden, so was the first book. Jeff is a thought leader in lean thinking. He's a design evangelist. He's an author, speaker, especially around product development and design. His Twitter handle is jboogie, that is JBOOGIE, and his website is Jeff Gothelf. But I'm pretty sure, Jeff, for many of those listeners, you do not need an introduction. However, what's new is that you just recently moved to Europe, to Barcelona. Is this because of the good tapas?
It is, hey Joe. It's great to be here. Yeah, it's really interesting. Look, I mean, the material that I write about, I genuinely try to live that way too. Not to the extent of being super nerdy, but there is an applicability to lean thinking to your life, right? You run small experiments, and if they work out, you take bigger risks. And I'm married and I have kids, and I've got a coaching and consulting business that I run on my own. And my first hypothesis was I can support myself as an independent practitioner, as a self-employed practitioner. And for the last couple of years, I've proven that hypothesis out. Now, the next thing is, okay, my next hypothesis was that I can run this business from anywhere in the world. And my family and I, for years, have talked about relocating somewhere outside of the United States. Mm-hmm. And for 4 of the last 5 years, we've run experiments, MVPs, if you will, mm-hmm. where we've taken a month out of every summer and taken the kids and have gone to live in another country for that month, just to try it out mm-hmm. and to see what we like and what we didn't like. And we've done this in Europe. We've done it down under in New Zealand and Australia. And based on what we've learned in these experiments, we fell in love with Spain and we fell in love with Barcelona. And since the initial MVP was successful, the experiment was successful, we figured we'd take a bigger risk and pick everybody up, and including the cat, and move him over here to Barcelona.
Wow, awesome! That's a great story, and totally makes sense for somebody who is so infused in agile thinking. I mean, that was a natural selection process for you. You wrote this book, and I want to talk about this new book. Obviously, the Lean UX is best-selling, as I said, but the Sense and Response. That book, some listeners out there might say, hey, another business book. It's about embracing change. We've been doing this since the 1960s. So what's so new about this new world out there? Why is Sense and Response so different?
Yeah, the biggest change is that software has consumed the world. That's the key. And not just software. Software's been consuming the world, certainly from the 60s as well. But the nature of software has fundamentally changed such that it is, frankly, it's irresponsible not to sense and respond. So what do I mean by that? I mean, software has become continuous. Mm-hmm. In the last 10 years or so, the whole DevOps movement has changed the way that software is deployed and developed, and the capabilities that's given organizations are tremendous if they choose to take advantage of them. So the fact that you can push code to production, Amazon does it every 11.6 seconds, right? So 5 times a minute at the extreme end of things, mm-hmm. Means that you can learn 5 times a minute, which means that you can improve the customer experience, the system, the software product, the service that you're building 5 times a minute. As quickly as you can get ideas into market, that's how quickly you can react and respond. And so you're putting stuff out there, you're sensing the impact that it has on customer behavior, and then you're responding to it. And you're seeing that in the truly disruptive companies in the market right now across every industry, right? And you know these names, and I'm not gonna give you any names you've never heard of, right? But like, one of my favorite stories is Tesla, right? So Tesla is a software company that happens to make cars. That's what they do, And there's this amazing story of Tesla going from a tweet to a feature in production in 6 days. Josh Seiden, my co-author, and I wrote a piece about it for MarketWatch, where some Tesla owner in California complained to Elon Musk on Twitter that people leave their cars on the chargers when they're done and walk away, and he needs to charge his Tesla. And people have walked away and their car is fully charged. And within 6 days, so Musk reads that tweet, and then within 6 days, they push a feature out to all the charger stations in the country that says, once your car is full, every minute that you stay on past full, you get charged money for.
Wow.
And there's almost no company in the world, certainly no automotive company in the world, that can match that level of responsiveness. Mm-hmm. And that's the key here. The key is that technology has not only consumed the world, but the nature of technology has changed, and it gives us tremendous competitive advantage if we actually make use of this.
Right. I mean, I was wondering about that feature, actually. Now you mentioned that, it makes total sense that there is a solution to that, but I was actually wondering about that as I saw several electric cars lined up for charging, right, and creating this blocker. Awesome. Great example, Jeff. Business and technology is intertwined.
Yes.
I myself, this is the reason why I'm in IT. I believe that IT can make the business world easier, more efficient, less painful for people doing their work and focusing on the creative aspects of work, right? But what do you think is the long-term impact of exactly what you just described? Let's say with the Amazon example or with the Tesla example. What do you think is the long-term impact here? I mean, this is, well, obviously in that part of the evolution, we're pretty early.
The organizations that will win in this reality are the organizations that take advantage of this. And what you'll see is a fundamental shift in the way those organizations plan work, in the way that, and in who they hire. And I'm not talking about specifically individuals, but the kinds of skill sets that they're looking for, in how they staff those folks, and ultimately how they incentivize those folks. You're going to see companies that are seemingly not technology companies reorganize as tech companies. You're seeing this again. One of the more public case studies that's happening right now in financial services is ING, the massive Dutch bank. Right? They are taking a top-down, digital-first approach to their business, and in doing so, they took the 3,500 people who work at headquarters in Amsterdam and made everybody re-interview for their jobs. Right? For essentially, does what you do or the way that you do it fit in our new reality? And to be very specific, they were explicit in what their new reality was. They've said this publicly several times. It's on YouTube, on videos of their CTOs and their CIO talking about this. They said, we are not a bank anymore. We are a software company that happens to work in the financial services sector. Mm-hmm. And so that's the key here. The key is, what does it mean to reassess your business as a software-based business? And the impact of that is you're going to see it in organizational design, in structure, in incentives, in planning, in success criteria. It permeates the way we do business.
Right. Is Sense and Respond, is that for IT organizations only?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The book was written as, I'm going to be a little tongue-in-cheek here, Joe.
Yeah.
The book was written as a response to the feedback that Josh and I sensed from Lean UX. So we wrote Lean UX as practitioners, as team leaders and individual contributors on software teams, as software designers. And the feedback, and Lean UX was a response to, how do we do design in an increasingly agile world? The feedback from the folks who read Lean UX, and to be clear, it wasn't just designers who read it, it was designers, product managers, engineers, leaders, etc. They all said the same thing. They said, this is great. we want to work this way, my boss won't let me work this way, or my company doesn't work this way. Mm-hmm. And so Sense and Respond was a response to that feedback, which said we have to write a book for the bosses. And we have to make the case for creating the kind of culture and the kind of environment that supports an agile and lean way of working. Mm-hmm. And so Sense and Respond is designed for managers and executives at any company. And the book is really divided into two sections. The first section says, you're in the software business. Software is your business, and that's how you scale, and that's how you compete, and that's how you win in the 21st century. And we have examples from every domain and every industry that we could find a case study for. I mean, literally everything from financial services to agriculture to fashion to retail to automotive and government and everything in between, so that no one could come back to us and say, well, that's great, but I work in healthcare, or that's great, but I work in government. So we've got case studies to really kind of say, look, you are in the software business. It doesn't matter what you do. And that's the first half of the book. And then the second half of the book says, okay, executive, C-level, VP, manager, whatever, right? Now that we've convinced you that you're in the software business, here's how things need to change. How's the way that you work, the way that you lead, the way that you manage to support a successful software-based business. And we talk about planning and finance and staffing and hiring and incentive structures and all of these components that make companies successful. And that's the key. The book is really written for any manager in a company, in a high growth or large company.
Right. Just to back up your software business claim, I couldn't agree more. I have had conversations with folks, Wall Street and in New York, and people, when applied certain agile practices, and we really try to push the envelope. We got responses such as, "We're a bank, not a software company." Right. And and I was asking, could you do the trades, by on paper, or do you need a software system for that? And then the answer is clear: you need a software system. This would be technically impossible to do this by hand. So you are in the software business. I couldn't agree more with that. So the question is really, when we hear answers like this, are we closing our eyes towards the important things here? I mean, I remember. I'm dating myself here, but in the 1990s, late 1990s, I heard people say this internet is not going to take off.
Yeah, I can't see. I mean, and again, we really did our best to make the strongest possible case we could for convincing everybody that they're in the software business. But it's impossible to ignore the fact that this is how people consume information. This is how people expect to interact with your business, and it doesn't matter how big or small your business is. I was doing a radio interview recently with someone, and he was talking about in the town where he lives, there are two competing Chinese restaurants. He lives in a small town in the south somewhere, and there's two competing Chinese restaurants, and the one that he likes better is not on his way home. And so he suggested to the woman, he said, look, why don't you communicate with me and with others with an email newsletter, right? Mm. That's something along those lines. Just take an initiative to at least create some kind of a two-way conversation with your market, because I always forget to go to your restaurant because it's not on my way home. And the owner of that restaurant chose not to do that, and he continues to forget to frequent her business. Now, it seems trivial, but if you can scale that up, right, into any kind of company, and it's about creating that two-way conversation with the customer, mm-hmm. and it's an active conversation, it's a passive conversation, and then most importantly, it's about reacting to it. And there's no way you can say this doesn't affect us. I just can't see it.
Right, and I think everybody out there listening to this, because I could, has an example like the Chinese restaurant here, very similar, right? You live with something maybe a little bit less perfect than the other option, but it's more convenient. But at some point, somebody will fill the gap and comes in and presents a better solution on the way home, and people would go away from that business. I mean, you see businesses fail and succeed and flourish out of that. Perfect. Jeff, is there Is there an end to all that speed or rate of change? Is there anything you see, like where are the limits of this?
I think the limits are going to be our capability as humans to respond to this, right? So I said earlier that Amazon pushes code to production every 11.6 seconds, right? And that we can respond at that same pace. Now, there are obviously automated optimizations that can be made at that speed to adjust algorithms and things of that nature. But, and content management systems and things like that. But I think our ability to remarkably affect the customer experience are ultimately limited with humans' ability to digest that information and then contribute humanity to that conversation. Because I want to be clear that we can't lose that from the conversation. So just because we can ship, sense, and respond 5 times a minute, it doesn't mean that we leave it all up to the machines to decide how to best optimize these customer experiences, right? This is where brands come into play. This is where values come into play. This is where design comes into play. This is where voice comes into play, ethics, all of these components. And so I think the limits are our ability as humans to contribute to the quantitative data that we're seeing and then making those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Well, you do speak a lot at conferences. You offer workshops, courses, training courses, and so on. What are common questions you're getting out there these days?
The most common question is, how do we get our executives to refocus their measures of success from outputs to outcomes? So it's a lot of folks like Jeff Patton and myself and Josh Seiden and others that talk about outputs and outcomes, right? Outputs being the stuff that we make, features and so forth, and outcomes being the change in customer behavior that we see after deploying these features, this output. Mm-hmm. Now, the traditional measure of success for most organizations, right, the traditional definition of done and Agile even is works as designed, right? We shipped it. Mm-hmm. But the change that certainly that I teach my clients and I coach my clients on is to change their measure of success to outcomes. Did we positively impact customer behavior? Did we make them more successful? And it's an extremely difficult shift for organizations to make. And so the questions that I hear all the time is, how do you do that? How do you get executives to care about these things? Because again, the history here is what drives modern thinking. The history is manufacturing, industrial era management tactics, right? Where we were making physical things. And as managers, we were taught and incentivized to make more stuff at lower cost. Now, software doesn't work that way. Software is a system. Software it's a continuously improving, continuously optimizable system. And so we need to make those optimizations based on how customers are behaving. And so those are the questions. The question is, how do you do that? How do you get people to actually care about this? How do you get them to change the way that they assign work? How do you get them to incentivize us differently? Those are by far the most popular questions.
Right, and that would be part 2 of your book.
Absolutely. And it's in the book, but really, again, to us, it's. And in fact, I wrote about this in my newsletter last month, the one that went out in July. Is I run exercises with executives in my coaching gigs to humanize their traditional metrics, so sales metrics, revenue metrics, retention metrics, that type of thing. How do you humanize those, right? What we try to do is we try to extrapolate what are the customer behaviors that drive sales, and then what are the customer behaviors that drive those customer behaviors, and then we look at those and we say, okay, and which behaviors do we actually care about over the next quarter or the next half, and then let's get teams to focus on optimizing these changes. And that's the very, very simplistic and short way of talking about it, but it's really trying to tie all of these traditional business health metrics, these impact level metrics, to customer behavior, and saying, look, these behaviors drive this. So let's talk about which behaviors you want to optimize for.
Mm-hmm. So you just mentioned sales as an example, right? We see in the agile world out there, we see a lot of conferences pop up that have agile outside of the IT, right? So this is a very common trend we're seeing right now here, at least in the US. Agile outside of IT, what kind of industries could be impacted? And I just take sales, for example, or HR and so forth. Do you share that trend? I mean, you're still in the U.S. Frequently, right? You're based out of Europe now, but do you share that trend that there's a strong interest in how to apply agile, possibly lean practices outside of IT?
Yes. Yes, that movement needs to be embraced more fully, and B, it has to happen for these transformations to take place. So if you've noticed, there's a theme in the conversation that we've been having, and it always rolls back to incentives, right? Incentive structures. Incentive is an HR component, right? And how do we incentivize people? How do we promote them? How do we do performance management? One of my clients over the last couple of years has done it's one of the bigger financial institutions in the U.S. Has done a tremendous job at transforming into a more nimble, more agile organization, and yet their performance management system still rewards people for the old behaviors. So they speak one language and they reward a different language, the old language. Right, without bringing that agile mindset, that agile philosophy, that lean philosophy to HR, to finance, to sales, the transformations that are happening in the tech groups and the IT groups and the product teams will only go so far. It won't have the kind of impact that these organizations are looking for unless we get these other folks on board and really understanding what it means to manage an agile organization, not just an agile product organization, but an agile company.
What do you think the impact will be of that? If, let's say, fast forwarding a few months or years down the road, what do you think we're going to see? How does an organization may look like than compared to today? I'm just looking at org charts here and so forth.
Yeah, so I think you see more cross-functional teams working together. So people from different disciplines, instead of working in their silos, working much more clearly together, winning or losing, incentivized as a team, and the incentive structures being based on customer success. So that's the ideal end state. So you see these companies that are building these empowered, customer-centric, cross-functional pods of subject matter experts, marketers, product people, tech people, et cetera, focusing on making customers successful, measuring their efforts in terms of customer success, and being rewarded for making those customers successful. And that's to me, that's the ideal state for this. And I think that's if we get there, that's a tremendous step forward. Mm-hmm.
Well, Jeff, you just mentioned end state, right? And even this podcast needs to come to an end. I think we touched on some really important topics, and very good always to hear your opinion about these things going on in this world. I just want to thank you for your time, and also good luck with the book, with your talks and your presentations around this topic. I think for many Agilists listening to this podcast from the IT world, and they have practiced IT and they're very familiar with IT, they can't wait until the other business units try and apply these practices in their unit as well to make it a fully agile culture.
Well, I would highly recommend that they give sense and respond to those people, because that's exactly the case that we're making for those people. So, but I appreciate you having me again, Joe. This is terrific, and it's always good to chat with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Agile.FM, the radio for the Agile community. I'm your host, Joe Krebs. If you're interested in more programming and additional podcasts, please go to www.agile.fm. Talk to you soon.